Well, welcome, John Higgins.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to talk about me, which is one of the things I enjoy most in the world.
So, when did you first get diagnosed as being an artist, then, John?
The it's so long ago I can almost I can't fully remember. It's like there's an actor who keeps saying, "Oh no, it's maybe the Joker." He keeps saying, "There's always someone. There's a new story of how I was created," type thing. And I've told my "How did I become an artist?" thing so many different ways that depends who I'm talking to. If it's in a pub, then it's completely different to when I'm talking to someone sensibly. It sound like I'm talking sensibly now, thinking about it. But no, it's yeah, it really was a long, long time ago. I don't think I've ever done anything with my hands that haven't involved making some sort of mess. So even when I was a kid, I was like, scribbling things down. And I remember I literally was, I don't know, 9 or 10, and I grew up in Liverpool, and they used to have a sort of a kids section in the newspaper, and you could send in your artwork and stuff like that. So kids used to sew in, I don't know, send in the cat or a drawing of a cat or something like that. I was really getting into space, and science fiction at that particular time. So I thought I'd do a star scene sort of thing. So basically, they just got a black piece of paper with lots of white dots on it. I don't think they printed it. So yeah, no, I have started. I've been an artist all my life, literally, and as soon as I can actually put black ink onto paper, I've been an artist, and that's definitely was the first time I remember doing that. I was around 10, so yeah, it's been a very, very long time. And I still enjoy it, and I think that's white on my finger now, so I'm actually doing some today. So I'm doing some commissions today. So
cool.
Quite nice.
Well, you used to be a medical artist, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's when I went to our college, it was one of those things where I started getting really interested in anatomy. And so like I sort of rediscovered comics because of a friend at the college was really into collecting comics in a really big way. I'd never seen anyone have that enthusiasm for like collecting comics, and his name was Avram Buchanan. And he was actually involved I had a retrospective exhibition in Liverpool in 2017. And his company, he became a very successful designer and had a lot of design companies. And anyway, he basically kickstarted my whole comics career, and he got me a retrospective exhibition in Liverpool 2017. So the connection's always been there. But I was really interested in the form, with superheroes. Anatomy was just something that I loved seeing. And when you got people like obviously Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, and when Neil Adams arrived, who was a bit more realistic in a way, he wasn't such a cartoonist as the greats before him were. So it's like Neil Adams, he sort of like really hit the scene mid to late 60s, I suppose. And like when I was at our college in the mid 70s, it's like seeing that sort of quality of work, panel after panel, page after page, it was just mind blowing. So I started doing anatomy. We had the good fortune of having a great tutor who wanted us to learn life drawings and things like that. So we did do a lot of life drawing. And because I was starting to show abilities in depicting, the human form, the tutor sort of like met a medical artist at a conference. And then I like ended up going to London and being interviewed for a job in the medical art department in the Royal Marsden Hospital. and got it because of my interest in comics, incredibly enough.
Yeah, I was going to say one of my questions was it must be great for your figure drawing to get to that sort of situation. I mean, were you actually drawing dead bodies and things like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, it's great. You know, they don't move, so you can actually draw them perfectly. The only problem with life models is the fact that they can move. So,
What were the illustrations for?
um, in those days, obviously, this is pre-digital, pre-internet, and
Mm.
the what can be done now for medical art and for the education. Basically, what I was doing for education, for like medical papers and things like that. So
Ah, I see. Yeah.
it was we needed to teach medical students anatomy or a particular type of operation. That
Mm.
sort of thing I was depicting. So I'd be in an operation. One of my favourite ones was transfrontal ethmoidectomy, which is the
Right.
thing I like talking about most when I'm in doing a talk, because I have like an anatomical illustration from that one particular operation, and it was just such a, it's wrong to say entertaining, but like it was such a an education for me as an artist to see inside the human body. So I depicting that step by step.
Mm.
So in a way, it was almost like, well, it was storytelling, but in an educational way. So stepping from that into telling, fictional stories, it was
Yeah.
just seems like a very easy step to me.
Yeah.
And the Royal Marsden Hospital in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, medicine was changing so much, and they were discovering new techniques of doing certain things. And the transfrontal ethmoidectomy was something that was just being developed specifically for certain sorts of operations, obviously. And the professor who was doing the operation was at the forefront of the education of psych and how to do that form of operation. So it was great, a great learning curve for me about anatomy. And it was also, I could probably operate on you and you might not survive, but I could probably go through the motions very, very well.
Yeah. So how did you get into comics? Because obviously it was pre-internet, wasn't it? You couldn't just email people and get in that way. So how did you go about infiltrating comics?
It was, I don't know, it was just so exciting. It's like, one of the reasons why I wanted to come to London was that's where all the publishers were in those days. And as you say, there's nothing on the internet to connect people together, or you couldn't apply to different companies. You actually had to turn up and take your portfolio. And when I talk to young students now, or so like young people at the conferences, conventions, and I tell them how much more fun it was when I was doing it, because you could actually go and meet an editor and you show your work, and it was just the best way of doing it. You might get more opportunity now, should we say. You can actually have your portfolio online, and it might seem easier, but it's certainly not as much fun. So when I first came down to London, part of the reason for accepting a job at the Royal Marsden Hospital was because I was in London, where most of the publishers I want to work with were, and that was for science fiction book covers. And obviously IPC, who started doing 2000 AD, just around the time I moved to London. They were based in London, and they also had lots of other comics as well, Battle Action and things like that. So coming to London was just the first step into like making a network, networking with people. You know what it's like. So, you talk to one person, they introduce you to someone else, and the connections start growing. And I met sort of like people like Gary Leach and Brian Bolland and Dave Gibbons in the early days. But Gary Leach was my first introduction into comics fandom in a way that's like, through fanzines and things like that. And Gary was just one of the bestest, one of the best introducer to that form of socializing, entertainment, and just a bloody nice bloke, basically, and a great artist. So
Yeah.
Come to London and meet people like Gary in particular was just one of the first steps of then being taken seriously and having the portfolio that I could take around to publishers and show the sort of work that I could do.
Right. So what were your first steps into getting into 2000 AD then?
It really was because I love science fiction, and science fiction was that really did rock my boat more than any other form of literature. And sort of like when I saw 2000 AD on the stands, you know, it's like an SF comic specifically, you know, set so far in the future in 2000 AD, for God's sake, living in the future. Oh, who would have believed in 1977? But going and seeing that on the stands, because I wasn't interested in football. So Roy the Rovers was not a comic that I would even dream of even reading, probably. But even though they had great artists in there, and Battle Action, they sometimes had SF in Battle Action and other minor comics that didn't necessarily specify that they were science fiction comics. So when 2000 AD introduced themselves onto the newsstands, I mean, I had to go and see them because I was starting to do book covers for science fiction companies.
Yeah.
So I took my portfolio into 2000 AD, into IPC, and it was just, you could ring up, you know, a couple of days before and sort of like say, I'm going to be around. Could anyone see my portfolio? And they said yes in those days. It's I still can't believe it, you know, now when I look back. When you talk to young artists now, sort of how difficult it is to break into comics now, or any form of illustration as a professional, because you're competing with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Is, you know, it didn't happen, you know, when I first got into the business. I was competing with the people in London or the people in Britain, you know.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that sort of like the internet might have given opportunity to people all around the world, but, you know, they're competing with you, the individual young person in Britain or in Ireland or whatever sort of thing. So yeah, it was, I hate saying this to young people, but it was a lot easier in my day.
So having shown your portfolio then, what happened? I mean, how long before you started to actually doing some work for the comic?
They were really good. So like, I think I was working at the medical art department in the Royal Marsden. So it was literally just about 4 or 5 tube trips into IPC, which is, I can't remember where it was now, somewhere on the South Bank. And so I could pop in there. Once you made a relationship with people, and once you had a relationship with the editors in particular, I mean, if you're an affable person and you could actually hold a conversation, they didn't mind you almost popping in, you know, if you show that enthusiasm and that the potential, because I certainly wasn't as good as the people who were appearing in 2000 AD in those days, you know, Bardinelli and Mick McMahon, Brian Bolland and Dave Gibbons and so many other great artists of that particular period. But I obviously showed potential to the editors at that time. So I got, the first one appeared in 1977, so it was a cover. And then it's like they quite liked that. But the weird thing was I hardly did any black line illustration in those days. It was all fully painted science fiction covers. And I felt like I'd gone back to square one in a way to learn how to draw, you know. It's like it's such a discipline to do not simple black line, but to do simple line and to make something complex and interesting with it.
Yeah.
So it was when I look at the 2000 AD has been my patron all my life, all my career, basically. I'm still working with them now, thank God. And I hope that continues for the rest of my career. And they basically supported me through my whole career. And I can look back on some of the early stuff that I did for 2000 AD
Mm.
Think, oh my God, I wouldn't employ me then. You
Yeah.
look at the stuff, and obviously the editor saw something that I'm still missing now. It's in the air. Looking at my early stuff, I
Mm.
was at the comic convention in Athens a couple of weeks ago, and it's really nice when you go around the world and people have been collecting my work
Mm.
for a long, long time. And the guy was like half my age, so he'd obviously gone to the bins at his local comic shop and picked up some old comics. But he brought in my very first Future Shock from 2000 AD, and I'd forgotten I'd done it, and it was just incredible to see that work that's like a 20-year-old whatever had done,
Mm.
40 odd years ago. It's just really a real, mind slip type of thing. You suddenly
Yeah.
back to the way you were then to a certain extent, and then you look in the mirror and you think, oh, bollocks.
Was it quite difficult to, because obviously with comics, it's a lot different to, realistic drawing. You've got those really sort of extreme perspectives and that sort of thing. Was it quite difficult to get into that sort of mindset to get everything looking, really sort of action packed and dynamic?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, because my background is education,
Mm.
illustration, it was, I had to like show clarity sort of thing. So things tend to be as they appeared. So to be a comic artist and to do the stretch perspective, and it was a real education for me. And mixing with people like Gary Leach, who's just he grew up breathing comics sort of thing. He lived and breathed comics, and he was had such a wealth of knowledge and ability that just through osmosis almost, I learned how to do certain things certain ways. And
Mm.
I'm still learning now, because my automatic response to a scene is to sort of like set it square and do things so people can understand that person is going to be speaking to that person, and then they're going to
Mm.
cross over, and then that so it's all those things are going through my mind before I actually start thinking about making it an interesting perspective or making it more dynamic.
Mm.
I have to really kick myself to remember to do interesting perspectives. And I'm quite happy to do close-ups. I mean, I do like doing the figurative sensibilities of being really close with someone, but doing the scene from above, I have to like try and think in my mind, is that going to make the story, give it clarity? And sometimes it doesn't necessarily give it clarity, but what it does do is like set the scene in a way so you can, it's almost like a plan of that's the villain over there and that's the hero over here, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I still have to remember to like, be more adventurous in what I'm doing.
So, when you draw comics, right? So, obviously, I've never drawn a comic. What sort of instruction do you get? So, obviously, you get a script. Do you get told how many pages, and what sort of instructions do you get basically to illustrate when you start?
Well, the best scripts I get tend to be like John Wagner. So like for me is one of the best script writers in the context of how he presents a script to you to you as the artist. And people like Garth Ennis and a lot of other British writers. I think Alan Grant actually sort of like did a masterclass once and showed people how the best way to present a comic stripped for 2000 AD.
Mm.
And so every script I get, and obviously now with Matt Smith at 2000 AD, and I think that they had a format, so like very, very early on. I think so like people like John Wagner and Alan Grant and people like that tended to create that format.
Mm.
So it's something that gives you all the detail. It tells you, that gives you the dialogue. It's like it sets out the basic scene at the very first part of the full scene. So if it goes over one page or 2 pages, the first panels like describe it's in a room. It's like there's a window, there's an entrance, there's a body on the floor.
Hmm.
And then it'll just sort of like introduce the characters, and then the characters will have a conversation. So you've already got in your mind how the scene is going to unfold. If the better writers will give you complete freedom, but they will also give you some really interesting directions. If they have a strength of imagery, like if they want to do something over the shoulder of a character, or if they want to do it from outside the window, they will introduce that. But most of the time, they leave that up to the artist.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems is young artists tend to overwrite a scene. They want to make sure you get everything in it. And that stifles a lot of artists. One of the worst people for doing that, and obviously one of the best writers in comics, was Alan Moore.
Right.
I mean, Alan Moore, if you saw the collected edition of Watchmen and the way Dave had sort of like cut out all the extraneous detail, when Alan wrote, and it was highly entertaining, it was just too much. When I used to do Future Shocks, I was very, very lucky that I did quite a few Future Shocks with Alan.
Yeah.
And getting the script was as entertaining as actually sitting down with us like a short story, science fiction story, and just being entertained.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have to sort of like read between the lines almost, and then find out what the story actually means. So as a genius as he is in relationship to sort of like, telling an incredible story, certainly for me, he gave me too much detail in the early days. And, it's just so entertaining thinking of some of the scripts you used to get from Alan. And it was a short, you used to get a 30-page script for a 5-page, comic strip. And it was very, very funny.
Well, this leads me nicely on to the Watchmen, because obviously, you've done everything in your career, but that's one of the standout titles in the Watchmen. So how did all that come about? How did you get involved with that?
No, I mean, the Watchmen is sort of like in Killing Joke. I mean, they're both, Watchmen probably more than Killing Joke changed my whole career in so many ways. It gave me a profile that, some artists can achieve through probably a lot more hard work than I had to put in. So yeah, the Watchmen is something I'm always happy to talk about. And the really interesting thing that I find, no matter how often I talk about it, I always think of something new. Just like, it's because it's like, it took, 18 months, 2 years, just like do from start to finish. The first time I started to talk to Alan and Dave about it, and then when we finally finished it. And just like work with someone or two people, Dave in particular, it's like month after month, week after week. It was just such a entertaining thing to do. It's like we became very good friends because we worked so closely together. And being involved with Watchmen created so many stories that can be apocryphal in a way, because people want to know about the working relationship with Dave and I, or how Alan and I and Dave worked. I mean, obviously Dave and Alan worked in a completely different way to the way I might have worked with him, because it was filtered through Dave, and Dave's incredible art. So yeah, I mean, it's being involved with Watchmen is one of the best things that's happened in my career, definitely.
So how did it come about? So when did they first come and talk to you about it?
Well, as I said earlier in our conversations, like I had to learn how to do black line artwork because I was a full color artist. I mean, that was my strength in a way, was full color, fully painted art. I love storytelling, so to be able to combine it with, when I first started doing work for 2000 AD, the major amount of full color, fully painted work you tend to get in the annuals.
Yeah.
And I just like 1988 was it was just around that time. Obviously, I just completed Watchmen. I did a couple of short stories, fully painted short stories for the earlier 81, 82, 83, 84 colour annuals for 2000 AD, and they were always great fun because it was a learning curve as much as anything.
Yeah.
So I was known for my colouring more than for my storytelling, probably.
Right.
And so Dave knew that I'd been doing stuff like that, and sort of like a lot of the because they were starting to cross, a lot of books, comic books were starting to be able to print quality colour because of the changing technology, and particularly when they were starting to use digital and computer-based printing presses and things like that. A lot of artists who specialise in black line, who are the best artists in the world, you know, they couldn't necessarily cross over into fully painted work,
Right,
or colour work. So I was asked a number of times to work with great artists like Steve Dillon, Brian Bolland, Alan Davis. You know, I did covers with all of these guys, or short stories. And also probably one of the famous, most well-known short stories with Steve Dillon. And it was the ABC Warriors we collaborated on. It was written by Alan Moore. And that was in one of the annuals. And that was great fun to do, working with Steve on that. So Dave and Alan knew had coloured and collaborated with a lot of different people anyway. And Dave and I were close in proximity, and we were starting to become friends. You know, you start bumped people, and as I said earlier, networking was such a really important part, is a very important part of what we do. So he just started talking about colouring. Would I be interested in colouring something? And to a certain extent, I wasn't really that bothered, because it was a completely different discipline to me to do handset. It wasn't even handset thing, that it was just markups.
right.
And I really wasn't initially inclined to do it. But Dave asked, and we arranged to meet with Alan and talk about the type of direction we might want to go in, because they did want to make it a very European sensibility, because they were huge fans of Dave in particular, of European and French comic albums. So they wanted that sensibility, and because of the way that Alan was going to be writing it, it definitely was a very mature approach to a superhero story, basically. And you know, so when they started talking about it, I got more and more interested. And plus the fact, the idea of being freelance and thinking, well, to have solid 2 years of work, is a very major incentive. So I did start on the basis of the fact that, okay, it's going to be fun to work with Dave and Alan, but I'm not particularly interested in being a colorist.
Yeah.
Not my job. My job is an artist, creator, all-round smart arse, I suppose. But we started doing it, and it was so much fun working with Dave and Alan. And Alan got busier and busier, so he was less and less on the scene. But working with Dave was just great fun, and we met up regularly and talked about the directions he wanted it to go in. And I was talking about the way to approach it, because of the story content and the flashbacks and all these things. So yeah, you just get as soon as you start to think about something creatively, it's you suddenly get that itch. You want to see it through. You suddenly want to find out where it's going to end up. And again, it's going on about when I received the very first black and white full comic strip from Dave, to be more or less the very first person in the world to have read it. Maybe 3 or 4 other people. I'm not even sure if he'd sent it to the editors. He probably sent it to the editors at the same time that I saw it to start colouring it.
Yeah.
And it was just so entertaining and so mind-blowing that I certainly knew that something new was happening in comics because of what Dave and Alan was doing.
Yeah.
I was slightly distanced from it. I was a fan first and foremost. The fact that I ended up being a professional colorist. It was just an additional bonus in a way. The fact that I was being paid to do something I'd never done before was actually very, very funny. Thankfully, no one ever told the editors that this was my very first handset job. So,
so, um, so one question. All of you were working for 2000 AD at the time, but it was published by DC Comics, wasn't it? So why did you go to Why was it published by them instead of 2000 AD?
Sorry, missed the first part of the question.
Oh, sorry, right. So all three of you were working for 2000 AD, but the Watchmen were published by DC, wasn't it?
Watchmen, yeah.
Yeah. So did you offer it to 2000 AD at all?
No. The great thing about Watchmen was the fact that, like, because Dave and Alan had started working for DC. I mean, DC had foresight and appreciated great artists and great writers. They'd be coming over to the UK to, I think the people at Steve McManus might sort of call it poaching talent.
Right, okay. Yeah.
So they'd been coming over for 2 or 3 years to actually, because people like Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, Brian Bolland had started to break the mold of what was expected in British comics and were being noticed by the Americans. So I think Dave had been doing the Green Lantern Corps for DC at that particular time. And I'm not sure, I think Brian had done Camelot 3000. And Alan, I think the very first job he did was probably Swamp Thing.
Right, yeah.
And I'm smiling because it's so funny, because he gave not only Swamp Thing, but the whole industry a kick up the arse by what he did with Swamp Thing as the script writer. And what he did was sort of like, I can imagine the editors sort of like at DC sort of like saying, well, here's a new young limey guy. Can he write? We think he can write. Can he write? What can he write? Let's give him something that he can't mess up, basically.
Yeah.
And they gave him Swamp Thing. And my God, he really changed things around. It was really funny, because when it hit the stands and when like it started on, that story started unfolding of what could be done with minor characters, because it was such allowing for the fact that Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson had created two of the best creators in American comics at that particular time. And Bernie Wrightson was just, he's always been a god for me in comics. He's such an incredible artist. He was still such a minor character, he's like hadn't really achieved anything. It had like a short run of about 12 issues or something. Might have gone on a bit longer than that. But anyway, he was like a minor character. And anyway, Alan just like gave that the whole industry a kick up the arse by what he did with Swamp Thing. So to a certain extent, they was like asking Alan what he would like to do, basically, and he wanted to do. DC had just bought Charlton characters, the number of dying characters that were even more minor than Swamp Thing, I think, in some ways. And so, like, they gave Alan the opportunity to do something with this team up of Charlton characters. But what he ended up doing with them when they read the script, when the editor is Dick Giordano, who was the editor at that particular time. And when he found out what he'd actually done to all the characters, he thought, well, no, maybe we can't allow him in a particular sandbox. So they basically sort of like said, create your own characters. So it started off at DC. And basically they replaced all the Charlton characters with the Watchmen characters. So they were created by Dave and Alan. And in a way, that changed the way that DC and Marvel approached creator rights. So Dave and Alan were the first ones to get a proper contract
Mm.
allowed them to share in the spoils and the success of the comic.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really funny. So like thinking back on, and this is it. You see, you're helping me remember how exciting it was in those days. And it's like thinking about what Alan did with Swamp Thing, and then going on to all the other incredible things he did, and Dave as well. So it's I do enjoy talking about Watchmen.
We were talking about the way you added colours because if I'm writing this, so the printing in America was different to the printing in England in that you had to sort of mark up by writing in the what colours were going to go where instead of just painting it on. Is that how it worked?
Well, we had all of Dave's black and white line, A4 pieces of paper with the artwork on. And then I would sort of like color up the page to what I thought. They gave me a palette, basically a DP palette, printing palette. And they had sort of like, 120 printed colors that the printers could use in those days.
Yeah.
And I shortened it down to around 62 tones and colors. So I used those colors specifically to color up individual parts of the page to make it into a colored page of artwork. Yeah. And then the tedious thing was actually writing down in the margins for the printers so they could do the separations, what the colors were. So Y2, R2, B2 and things like that, which would be a yellow-brown sort of thing.
Yeah.
RB2 is a red purple sort of, and so you have to write down every single thing, including the eyes.
Yeah.
And I think in a way that probably the reason that my colouring allowed for the colour concepts that I had when I was doing the colouring to relate the colour to the story. I think I probably was one of the few colorists to actually write down so much detail, so I wouldn't miss, a little corner. I would indicate every single colored bit,
Yeah.
I didn't keep it simple, basically. So that's my own fault for making a rod for my own back. But obviously, the end result was obviously well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be one of my big sort of exploration of your comics by talking about the muted down colours, secondary colours, but it looks like everyone got there before me. Why did you choose that sort of muted colour set? Was there a reason behind it? I mean, it works great.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I enjoyed was sort of like, one, we wanted it to look completely different to the standard American comic.
Yeah.
So we used a muted set, and because we had so many variations and so many different scene settings, it's like, I really did take into account what, the costumes would look like or the clothes would look like if they were in a, Dryberg's, the Night Owl's neon lit kitchen, and things like that. So I tried to like use variations. As I said, I created a rod for my own back. So I was trying to like do lots of variations and give a dimensional aspect to the figures.
Yeah.
And the great thing for me was like having an artist like Dave depicting those figures, because he always gave an opportunity to backlight, so I could use complementary colors from 2 directions or 3 directions.
I see. Yeah.
So Dave gave me the opportunity to explore the color palette that we had. And the color palette was quite limited. Nowadays, a colorist can use millions of colors and they would tend to reproduce almost perfectly.
Yeah.
In those days, it just wasn't that, it was simple, but it wasn't that simple the way it reproduced.
Right.
So I was trying to work within the guidelines of what the prints could do, but also try and make it look very much this side of the Atlantic type of colouring, so it wasn't just associated and dropped in the middle of, the standard American colouring. And I'm not saying the colouring wasn't good in those days in American colour. American colourists as the best in the world, but they were limited by the palette. So I wanted to expand that palette, and that's what we managed to achieve with Watchmen.
Right. Okay. When it was released as a book, did you tweak those colours at all?
We got the opportunity to, when it was digitalized, because for a very long time we actually had to live with the original hand seps and the original printing plates.
Hmm.
And when sort of like, I think DC bought out Malibu Color, I think it was the company they bought out, but there was so many color companies being set up when the digital boom happened, you know. So in the probably mid 90s, late 90s, there was lots of different uses for digital help, should we say, and a lot of digital production within comics. And it brought a lot of new opportunities. And one obviously was the fact that, so like, you know, once you have a digital image, then that can go on forever, sort of thing. The plates don't deteriorate, the colors stay the same, you know, so like, and so on and so forth. So when DC finally invested after 25 years or whatever it was, 23 years, they decided to invest in scanning one of the most successful comic books in the history of comics.
Yeah.
They digitalized all the pages, and I think it was Malibu Color Studios that they'd bought into DC. They colored up every single page exactly the same as it was in the original comic book.
Yeah.
And they actually digitalized every single mistake I ever made on the original coloring, which I think it still makes me laugh thinking about it now. So it was actually really interesting, because not only did they do half the work that I might have needed to do if I'd have been digitalizing a modern version of Watchmen in 2005, I think it was, but they supplied me with the whole colored digital version of all the pages, basically all set out digitally. And it was just, they were all just color files, and it was great fun. So I actually got half the work done for me by the studio. But then, because we had the opportunity, I can actually go in and digitalize it the way I would see it now.
Yeah.
But the great thing was, so like, I almost did the same. Excuse me, I'm talking too much about myself. I'm enjoying talking about myself so much, I better have a drink.
That's all right.
I almost did, no, I won't say that. Thank God I had a drink, because then I could reform my brain. No, what I was thinking of, so like, more modernizing it, should we say, so like bringing it more up to more naturalistic approach to the coloring. Even though my naturalistic approach would be still similar-ish to what I would do for Watchmen anyway, just because that's the way my mind works. But Dave said, no, we have to like make just a more modern digitalized version of the original colors.
Right.
So I went through the whole 320 pages or whatever it is, and tweaked every single page to get it the way I wanted it to be. And that was really interesting in a number of different ways, because one, I could get rid of so many inadvertent errors we did in the original coloring. And also we could do more variant tones, should we say. We can combine the tones a lot more subtly, but we still wanted, because of Dave's good sense, we still wanted it to look exactly, when people picked up the original color and then pick up the modern color, they should look the same. The digital one should look a little bit cleaner, a bit more in your more apparent sort of thing, you know, sharp or whatever sort of thing. So there is a difference. You can see the difference, but it was a great opportunity to clean up something that had been bugging me for 20 odd years before we got around to doing the digital version.
Well, it's an amazing book. I mean, it's I think many people have said this, but it changed the way that people outside of comics viewed comics. I think that's the best way to describe it. It sort of made them a bit more adult and a bit more grittier, and it brought a lot more respect, I think, back into comics. Because they were sort of regarded as sort of kiddie and camp before then, weren't they? Really?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about Watchmen and obviously Dark Knight and a couple of Cerebus was another one that was mentioned around that time. So like there was sort of like things. I think it was that zeitgeist moment where sort of like the young fans of 10, 20 years previously were now very highly talented creators. So the Frank Millers and George. Dave Sim and people like that, obviously Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore and Brian Bolland, Alan Grant. I want to go down the whole list now. People of these great creators of that period who were changing comics in a completely new way. And so like definitely Watchmen like gave the broader audience, within comics, within the industry, who knew, so like, the mid 80s onwards, things were changing because of the creators that we were getting into the industry.
Yeah.
But when you like got the color supplements of the broadsheets, the newspapers, reviewing graphic novels, it was sort of, that had never happened before. No one reviewed in a serious newspaper, a comic before. And that's where it's like you start debating what is a comic, what's a graphic novel, and you can't sort of like introduce that into a conversation with comics creators because no one can still agree what's a comic and what's a graphic novel. But yeah, it was a whole, 1986 was changed comics publishing for the better.
Yeah. I think at Time Magazine as well, it listed the book in the top 100 books that you have to read as well. So, I mean, that was amazing, wasn't it? The fact you got that sort of recognition.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great thing. So, like, when the millennium happened, like, the fact that we were put in the list of the 100 greatest novels.
Yeah.
Not graphic novels, but novels of the 20th century was just makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up still. It's just what an acknowledgement.
Yeah. Well, The Killing Joke. I mean, that was your next project, wasn't it? Or it came after that. But how did all that come about?
Which one? Sorry,
The Killing Joke.
Oh, The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I so like the great thing about, as we said earlier about my profiles, like because of Watchmen, so like people were asking me to be involved in other projects, and I turned down a lot of coloring projects just because I wanted to be the whole thing, pencil or inker and colors. So whereas I had very little doubts about doing Watchmen originally, I had serious doubts about doing Killing Joke. I really wasn't that interested in doing it at all. And I actually did sort of like have, because like the success of Watchmen showed how when the creators share in the rewards, royalties of a sort of successful book, you're more committed to it.
Yeah.
And that's not just sort of like being, it's being sensible, that's what we do. That's our living.
Yeah.
We don't want to, it should not be hand to mouth. You should be given the opportunity to earn enough money to actually like do the best work you possibly can within deadline. And so like also if in the future, so like, it's carrying on selling, and funny enough, Watchmen is still carrying on selling, you want to like sharing the success of that.
Yeah.
And I was, even though Dave and Alan actually had said to DC they wanted the colorists to share in the success, they didn't have anything in place at that particular time for me to share in the success of royalties. So I got paid very well. And they actually also gave me ex gratia payments, so I got additional monies just because it was so successful. The money must have been sloughing all around the studios, and they thought, well, let's shovel some off and give some to John, and they did. So I have no quarrel. I went into Watchmen with my eyes open, and Dave and Alan, the honesty of working with creators like that, they're just you want to work with people like that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't want to do The Killing Joke because I wasn't going to share in any royalties. I said, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
They were, let's say they were desperate. And because of the success of my colouring on Watchmen, they did say, we assure you, they personally assured me that I will be retrospectively rewarded because they were putting in place contracts for colorists around that time.
Yeah.
It was, 95, something like that, I suppose. So I believed them. And that was a mistake because they didn't pay me any extra.
Right.
I had to fight for it for a very, very long time, and they paid me a piddly amount because I had to deal with some corporate lawyer a couple of years ago and been banging on at them year after year after year. When are you going to give me the contract for Killing Joke? And they never did. So anyway, that's we can actually do another podcast about how pissed off I am about The Killing Joke earning millions and me earning very little of it. But no, working with, again, Alan, the pleasure of receiving the finished artwork from such an incredible artist like Brian Bolland. It was just so rewarding, so entertaining. I mean, that's those projects and the projects I'm even working on now, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning every day.
Yeah.
To come to the studio and carry on working. I love what I do now as much as I did then.
Yeah.
You should be working on Brian Bolland's. We had prints. I mean, this is completely different to the markup that we did for Watchmen.
Right.
So what we did with Killing Joke, it was hand set. No, it wasn't. I'm getting confused now. It was blue lines.
Right.
But the blue lines I worked on a printed blue piece of artboard, and it was printed, Brian's coloring, black lines printed as blue on a page of art, full-size page of artwork.
Mm.
And so I colored that for full color, and then they overlaid the black line on top of that. So it was basically a fully painted job, which was great fun to do. And because I'd had such recognition for doing that form of colouring, the palette of colouring, should we say, for Watchmen, I decided to keep it quite close to what I'd been told was a successful colour palette for Watchmen. So I did the similar type of thing with Killing Joke. And I had a ball, and I'm still pleased and proud of the colour effects that I achieved in that particular time. And it was really interesting because the deadline was so tight, and I had to turn it around, with no corrections. No, we couldn't go back as we can digitally now. So everything that I did was the paint went down. I finished off that page and then went on to the next page. And you have to know what you're doing, basically. You can't faff around and go back and tip X or change the layer or whatever sort of thing. It had to be right on the day. So the deadline was really tight because of the Batman movie, whichever one was out at that particular time. Yeah. Because as soon as, it's like a 2-hour advert. As soon as anything superhero related, Batman or Watchmen or Judge Dredd, it's like a 2-hour advert of that particular comic.
Yeah.
So every time a Batman movie came out, everything Batman related sold hundreds of thousands more copies. So they wanted to make sure that the Killing Joke was going to come out around the time of whatever Batman movie was at that particular year.
Yeah.
And we achieved it. And the thing is, the fact that it's such a classic story, it's such, again, so like Alan came up, no matter what Alan might think about things in retrospect, he actually came to the mark and got it exactly right on Watchmen and on Killing Joke. I mean, it's like it's so influential in so many different ways.
Yeah. What did you think of the Watchmen movie?
I loved it.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I see it more every time it's on TV. I can watch it and so like really enjoy parts of it that I hadn't noticed before. I mean, Zack Snyder was sort of like, we went to a press screening, Dave and I, and just me and Dave. I don't think Alan was there, funny enough. And so like Zack was like talking to the audience of invited newspaper people. And he was like saying he's a huge fan. He's a comics fan. He's like a Watchmen fan. And he did what I did with Killing Joke, which was initially turn it down. He like says, if I do it and I spoil it, not only will I be upset with myself, but hundreds of thousands of Watchmen fans will be upset with me as well, and maybe millions. But he decided, it wouldn't be. If someone else had done it and messed it up, he would have been really angry at the fact that he didn't do it and hopefully not mess it up. So he decided he was going to do it. And just sitting through it, I mean, he paid acknowledgement to my colouring. Obviously, it's a more naturalistic colour, but he used filters in places, which he told me that's because he wanted to pay proper respect to the whole book, not just the story or not just Dave's scene depiction. And it was such a kick to see you talk to Dave about it, and he sort of like says the scenes that have almost reproduced exactly as the comic. And that's the respect that sort of like, some directors have when they're transposing from the printed page into 3-dimension, 2 dimensions, whatever it is, moving around and with music and color. So I loved it. And so whatever faults it has, I have no problem with whatsoever. They're so minor compared to all the positives that, I love it.
Well, you've done a lot of work for 2000 AD in terms of things like Dredd and, what was your favourite strip that you did for them?
There's probably a couple, but the one that's sort of like, in a way, for comics 2000 AD fans and creators, the ones that sort of like seem to have transcended its time period was A Letter from a Democrat, the Democracy series.
Yeah.
Colin McNeil came in 15 odd years later and did America, which tied into the original series that I did. And that for me was sort of like when, we're talking about the way Watchmen changed world comics. I mean, it's like Letter from a Democrat and the Democracy series. It's like changed, it gave a maturity to British comics and probably world comics in a different way.
Yeah.
So that was probably my my number one. And my number two is, so I have a character called Razorjack.
Oh, yes, yes.
Co-created with myself. And that was actually, we did a tie-in with my character and Judge Dredd a couple of years ago.
Right.
And it was written by one of my favorite writers who I collaborate with quite regularly, Michael Carroll. And colored by Sally Jane Hurst, who is one of my favorite colorists now. And it's really funny, the fact that I hardly color any of my stuff now, except if I'm painting anything, then I will paint it. But we have a coloring studio just on the other side of the garden back there. So my wife, Sally Jane Hurst, she colors in there while I'm slaving away in black and white here. So those two books in particular are my top 2000 AD stories, I suppose. But I've been incredibly lucky that I've worked with some of the best writers at 2000 AD. I mean, Garth Ennis has written for 2000 AD, obviously Alan Moore and John Wagner, Alan Grant. And there's so many great writers who come out 2000 AD.
Hmm. What was your favourite character other than Dredd and Razor Jack, would you say?
In the whole, not necessarily ones that I've done. Actually, probably yes, I have done Batman. I mean, after Judge Dredd and after Razor Jack character would be Batman. There's Batman about he's fallible. I think
Yeah.
the thing that I like about characters is there has to be a darkness to them. And Dredd and obviously my character Razor Jack and Batman, they have a darkness to them.
Hmm.
And I know in the past they've introduced that subtlety into Superman and other superheroes because you can't be one-dimensional now because of what we were talking about with Alan Moore's storytelling in Watchmen and Killing Joke. It's there's a darkness to people, and that gives a full rounded character, even in comics. I think comics have grown so much, and since the very first time Superman appeared in 1939. Sort of, I don't think those people would believe what we write now.
Yeah, it's become, especially the movie industry. I mean, it's everything's superheroes these days, isn't it? What do you think about that? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Um, when they first appeared and when the quality was, when the Marvel in particular, I mean, I know we had some classic Batman probably before Kevin Feige started the Marvel universe. I think Batman has achieved the quality that we just want to see in a good superhero movie.
Yeah.
It's when they're just superhero movies without anything that sort of like makes you interested. If it's just big men and women sort of like punching the hell out of each other and flying around to alien worlds, it can get very, very boring. So yeah, I mean, when they first started, when Kevin Feige first started the Marvel Universe, it was such an eye-opener when they got it right with Iron Man in particular, and then the Avengers series. I mean, there's just such good quality writing, such good quality acting. And then it's sort of like they start to slowly strangle the golden goose, and so there's been quite a few duffers coming out of DC and Marvel over the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm getting a bit sick and tired of second-rate superhero movies. But any great superhero movie or any great movie that is related to comic books, I'm happy to see. I love the first Joker. The Joaquin Phoenix one.
Yeah.
I thought that was just. I mean, again, there's a debate why some people don't relate to the Joker from 2000 from Batman series, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, it was just an incredible movie. It's like it's Mean Streets and Taxi Driver, and it's just all these things that's like we love about Gotham City. We all know Gotham City is New York. How bad and black and dark it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in New York. I mean, the fact that things change in a positive way is great, but you can imagine a lot of old New Yorkers are like saying in those days, even though you could get shot on the subway, it was great to walk down the street in Manhattan. Yeah. Nicer place now, but well.
What are you working on at the moment, if you don't mind me asking?
I've just finished a little one-off my character Razor Jack. I've just completed it.
Oh yeah.
It's in an independent comic that just came out from Time Bomb Comics, and I just literally finished that a couple of weeks ago. It's out in the shops now, so definitely go out and check that one out. And I'm just doing a couple of commissions. I just finished a cover for Battle Action for Dredd. The strip that I'm doing with Garth Ennis for Battle Action, and that's definitely recommend that to people when that comes out. That's one of the most interesting stories I've ever depicted. I think it's Garth, stretches things in a way that's sort of like, no one else does. I mean, yeah. So that's something I've just finished. So there's a cover that I've just finished, which I love doing. So I love fully painted stuff. So to go from black and white line to fully painted stuff is just so much fun. And I'm just about to start, let's say, a couple of small commissions, which I'm really looking forward to doing. And then I'm going to be going into the next Dreadnoughts, 2000 AD. So I'll be starting that in a couple of days. So I'm really excited about that, because taking such a long break from something that I'm quite steeped in, because we've been doing this series since lockdown, actually. So that's quite a long series. So it takes breaks. And it's quite nice to have a break and then go back to it, so you feel refreshed and you come back with new ideas. So I'm really excited to get stuck into that. So yeah, that's what's coming up next.
Brilliant, John. Well, thanks for the chat. It's been fascinating, as I knew it would be.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for the questions and allowing me to talk about me.
Well, it's good to hear from you, mate. It's good to hear all the stories. It's one of the things I always wanted to be myself and never had the talent. So it's nice to meet people like yourself.
Brilliant. I appreciate that.
Cheers, mate. You take care.
And you owe me a pint, by the way. No matter where we are, I want a pint of Guinness.
I'm always grateful for that. So yeah, definitely, mate. Talk to you soon, mate.